That's how it works.
Fuck.
You can
all
make
right.
me go first. I'll
That's
go in the
fair.
hot seat.
Give it something juicy.
Bring the wild man out first.
I'll make all of you seem reasonable.
Wild
I mean,
Omnus.
Matt already showed up and made me reasonable, so...
People are like, what the fuck is Omnus talking about? The
Man,
dude's
this-
played 3 games in 2 weeks and thinks he knows what's going on now.
Okay, there's
But that's half the
that.
fun. None of us really know what we're talking about.
I've listened to probably like 20 or 30 hours of podcasts in the last like
You're
2
a
weeks.
Madman.
You know, it's like hour commute to work, hour
That's
commute
fair.
home. Sometimes I'm listening on my lunch. You know, I walked over to the gas station to grab something today. Listened to a Zion. Is it Space Slugs or Zions? I was listening to Zions today.
Silence, Utah, Space Slugs, Australia.
I know where they are. I was just trying to remember which one was the one I most recently listened to.
That's fair.
One of them had an accent that's not yours.
I mean, Utah has a pretty
Well, I
good
also
accent, too.
watched a Space Slugs YouTube video this morning, and so that's where I think it's.
We just don't listen to Red Mandos. Only rule.
I haven't.
Wow, what is happening in this chat? Wow. I mean, obviously, the Thrawn lover is the dictator. It fits. Like,
Grand Admiral Dizzard, we got it.
There you go. How do you guys like the Thrawn eyes at the top of the banner, though? Like, I don't know. It fits too well. Like,
that's fun. It's been the most commonly talked about thing in the chat recently, so I think it's very thematic for right now. Yeah.
I was gonna change it as like stuff changes, like next meta relevant or like next like
exactly.
big thing.
Yeah. Makes it fun.
Are we up
as
on
they,
Twitch
as
now?
they do the
We are
tease
live,
at the end of a mini extravaganza?
I wish it did more stuff like that, where it was like that picture was so good at Ministrav, and like it's still so good. It makes a great emoji too. Which reminds me, I still haven't gone back and fixed the cutouts. There's always something to do. All right, let's see. Sarah Crow.
The downside of being the dictator.
You're not wrong. I gotta send off a message real quick.
Anyone want to quit? I wanted to have chat open on my thing. Does anyone quickly remember how to
pop out?
Go into chat only mode on Twitch?
Yeah. Bottom. Ooh, where'd it go? Oh, bottom right settings. Little gear, and then there should be a pop out button. Where's it at?
Pop out chat. Yeah, nice.
Somewhere in there. It's somewhere in there.
If I pop out the chat, can I close the other Twitch?
You should be able to, yeah.
All right, sweet.
Sweetness. Okay, what else? I will try to let's talk about something else like New Leia this week. I don't, Sarah Pearl, you can't talk about New Leia unless it's about like torturing her for information. You are all in on Empire. You can't back out now. Like, okay. Sarah Pearl, since you are in the chat, how does all the audio sound? You're my guinea pig.
Sarah Cruel, the legend. Are we saying the name right? Is it Sarah Cruel?
So far, so good. Okay, good. Yes. Okay.
Sweet.
Sweetness. All right. We got the buttons. We got this. Let's go ahead and get started with this show.
Welcome, my young apprentice. Stretch out with your feelings. I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
Welcome back to another week of Rogue Support. This one, we got a wild one for you because you heard it here first. the man, the myth, the legend. Wild Omnus is returning to Shatterpoint, and he is here to bring you his sultry tones. Omnus, how are you doing?
Dude, I'm good. I probably have not looked forward to recording a podcast as much as I've looked forward to this. It just feels good to be back. Thank you all.
Ooh,
Grand
we're flattered.
Admiral Dizzard.
And as always, we have Matt and Accuser here as well. And you better get used to these faces / voices because we are here to stay and we're giving you the content that you want to listen to. At least I think so, and I hope so. Like, we'll just go with that. So we got a big show for you tonight.
We've not been told otherwise.
That's true. We have not been told otherwise. And I do think the audio technical difficulties have been fixed. Please let me know because I would like it to be fixed. So we're going to go ahead and start off with welcoming Omnus again and how coming back to Shatterpoint has been for you in your journey over the past few weeks.
Well, I want to shout out, I believe his name on the forums is Darth Donovan Fett and Classic Flava, as I've played 3 games in person with them in the last, 8 or 9 days. And it's just been good to kind of get my bearings, get back into it. And those just played some really great games with those guys. And special shout out to Donovan. We had my first game on Never Tell Me the Odds. And we had this crazy struggle 1, and the struggle 3 was so different. Ended up with this cluster of Dooku, Magna Guards, and Django on one point that's within range 5 of the other point, which is my Sabine, Mando, and Bo. And so we just could not fight over those 2 points. Nobody was doing anything to those 2 points, which I've never had that extreme of control over 2 points. It was just a really unique game. So big shout out to Donovan.
Nice. So what you been playing?
Mando in 2 of the games, kind of combined with some classic, with the Mandalorians of past, and then trying out a couple different loadouts with Mando. First game was DTE and Dark Troopers, which felt fine. But then I tried Sabine and Rebel Commandos, also cool. And then I was just like, let me get my bearings on Empire, and so I just played a game Gideon box plus Iden box. And I'll tell you, Diz, you can be the Empire guy. As much as I wanted to be an Empire guy, I did not enjoy it. I rolled over Classic Flava. Like, I thought he started off playing better than me. And I thought, I'm like, man, I'm going to lose this game. Feel like I'm just getting behind. And then just the Iden box of activation started coming, and then just stuff died. And I didn't feel like I was making good plays. I mean, I didn't feel like I was doing anything special. I was like, I guess I walk forward and roll a crap ton of dice and you die. And I was like, and honestly, even Gideon, who I was really excited about, I kind of found less interesting. When you're used to playing like Maul and Mando and stuff, I just didn't find that they were hitting for me in the right way. So, dude, Empire's all you, buddy. Like, take it away. Maybe when Boba Fett comes out, I'll do a little more Empire mix. But yeah, I thought Classic Flavor was playing better than me, but fucking Iden be Iden, yo.
Iden be Iden. So you mentioned Never Tell Me the Odds, and I know, like, in our off channel chats we've talked about, and one of the big things I kept trying to tell you was, like, you're gonna like Never Tell Me. It's very much your speed. Did that track? Do you think it's very much like your type of mission where you have high mobility that's very different with what's going on? What are your thoughts on the mission coming back?
So my last 2 games were on Never Tell Me the Odds. I did shifting priorities for my first game back just to kind of minimize how much stuff I had to kind of take in. Never Tell Me the Odds is cool. Like, I do like it. It wasn't like playing my first game of Sabotage where I was like, this is not as enjoyable. But I will tell you, as much as I think it's an interesting puzzle to solve, and I'm looking forward to playing more games on it and seeing like how the gears and stuff turn. I'm a shifting priorities man. I love shifting priorities. And so I don't know if that makes me crazy, because I think like most people hate it, but I'm seeing it show up in, like, we'll kind of talk about it later in the show, right? But people are playing shifting priorities in their competitive lists, as a choice. And I think I prefer it. If I had to pick one to still be my favorite, it would still be shifting priorities.
Awesome. Well, do you two, Matt and Accuser, have any questions that you'd like to ask Omnus before we move on?
Probably nothing right now. I'm sure I'll throw some stuff at him as we go through this.
Well, Matt, you and I, listening to you on the show, like the couple of episodes that you've done, plus I listened to your, you were on 2 episodes at least, or not, like 3 episodes of Hello There that I've listened to, I think. A lot of the time I'm listening to you talk and I'm like, I feel like Matt and I are jiving. Like I get what Matt is throwing down.
Good. I'm glad. Well, I have somebody else to back me up with these two over here in the in the chat. I like it.
I mean, as far as for me, questions, what are you looking forward to playing next now that you've ruled out Empire?
Dude, honestly, I don't know if this sounds weird, but I kind of want to go back and explore Separatists more. I'm enjoying Mando a lot, but I also feel like there isn't that many options to build his list around, and I kind of miss building around the Republic era primaries, right? Where you just have this great list of secondaries and stuff to choose from. Like you put down Asajj and you're like, do I want to play Bo? Do I want to play Gar? Do I want to play Django? Do I want to play Kraken? And I don't know. I kind of miss that a little bit. And I think Separatists are kind of getting left behind. And I feel people are trash talking them online. So I might end up being the Separatist guy. That might be a thing that happens.
Roger.
God damn it. Fuck the B1s.
Changing the name of the channel back to Roger Rogers.
Do it.
Let's get some robot arms added to the logo.
Let's not get in a war over channel names. Leave Separatist channel to me. I will leave the Imperial channel to you.
Fair enough. All right, let's get into the fun part of the show. Hot takes, cold drinks, and we're going to go right to Omnus. What is your hot take and your cold drink?
Okay, well, I want to ask you guys, do you want moderate Omnus, or do you want me to start this shit off crazy?
Wild Omnus! You got to have it.
It's your first day back. You got to go to a full 11.
Okay.
Matt,
are you?
Oh yeah, give it to hit me with it. I'm ready.
Okay. So, first off, I'm gonna say, I don't think Vader 1 has ever been S tier ever, and I think everyone who's thought of him as an S tier was wrong. I think a lot of people he's always been A. He's always been a great character. I think there's a lot of people who were playing relatively average lists because a lot of Shatterpoint is average. And there's not that many things that spike super high. And I think he was the first time that a lot of people had to accept that they were playing a relatively average list, and Vader 1 is going to prey on that kind of stuff. You got to step up your game, and a lot of people don't like looking at an enemy option and going, I need to think about that when I build my list. And that's a tough pill to swallow. But I'm going to take it a step further, and I'm going to say Vader 1 is not just important to the game. I think Vader 1 is actually good for the game, in the sense that if you go back to Star Wars minis, melee characters sucked for the most part. And I think it's really cool that AMG launched right away. Like, here is something that a melee oriented, lightsaber oriented team can build around. And like I said, I'm going to stand by. I think Vader 1 is a good character for the game. And I hope that character doesn't get nerfed, even though I'm not that excited to play him. Was that hot enough to come back?
I wish I had like a little flame soundbite, like turn the heat up. Oh man, I need to get some Guy Fieri sound bites. That's what we need. I like it though. I don't disagree. Before, when you and I had talked, we said Vader 1 is cool, but he's not all that. There's ways to play around it, and we were touting Mama Dooku and Mama in general and all this other stuff, and then in our absence it absolutely took off, and it was like, hey, here it is. I do think that Vader 1's good. I think it's good for the game, and I would argue that the kill factor that Iden brings to the game is more oppressive than Vader 1 was.
Is that your hot take for
that? Is my hot take. Haha, good segue.
that kill power of Iden is higher than Vader 1, even with Vader 1's identity.
Yep.
Interesting. I don't know if I agree with that.
That's fine. You don't have to.
Yeah,
That's why it's your hot take. Yeah.
I'm not touching the stove with that one. That might actually be hot.
Yeah, Cyril, we missed a cold drink for Omnus.
True.
I'm doing my classic. I got a Space Dust in hand. It's a go-to for Omnus. I feel like coming back to Rogue support is such a home for me that I got to do my home classic Elysian beverage.
That's fair. Yeah, when you look at what Iden is doing to the game, though, like between Iden and I guess the Iden box more so than just Iden specifically, right? Because you have the extra hit from Hask, it's just become super consistent. Whereas like the ISF are typically on dice average, and to the average character should be 2.5 successes. Well, now they're getting 3.5 successes, and that let's just say 4 to round up because we're just going in favor of kill right now. 4 successes in the ISF is what, 7 damage? I think it's either 7 or 6. Can't math off the top of my head. But like 6 damage from 2, that's 12. That's killing a Vader. That's killing a Grievous. Which that's a support piece that's doing that with rather consistent odds. And the only person who could really do that before was Vader 1 because he's adding 2 damage from his stuff. So, but now the biggest thing that I say is where it's either equal oppressiveness or a little bit more is because they're doing it at range, and that adds a whole nother element to it, and it's not locked to melee. That's where I think it's like getting that edge is because you're doing it at range.
So you're giving Iden the rest of her box as part of her kit, really?
Yeah, I 100%.
Yeah,
I think you're going with like
what
just
I'm hearing
Iden
is
as a
getting
character.
Hask is very good.
Well, the whole package, in my opinion, it's the whole package. The Iden box itself is equal to or more oppressive than Vader 1 was to the meta.
And that includes Del Miko if you're including the full box, right?
He's in the box.
That is true.
He sits on my
shelf. Technically correct.
Like, I still won't play Iden though. I still don't like playing her. Like, I don't like. Yeah. Oh, cold drink. I already finished my Sour Monkey, and I'm on to Sam Adams now. The rest of the summer series. So
we're gonna have that kind of episode.
Yeah.
Which Sam Adams?
I got Pool Party and Summer Ale. This one's Pool Party. All right, let's move to Matt. What you got?
Pool
hot
Party's
take.
Good.
Hot take. Hot drink.
Yeah, so I'm on hot drink tonight. Kids are cesspools, so I am fighting off a cold. So I have a nice little just black hot tea in my Yoda cup. So because my drink is hot, my take is going to be a little on the cold side, only because it's something we've already been talking about, but just kind of wanted to reiterate it is every time we talk about tier, strength, things like that, meta, people are still just like every week I get a little surprised with, oh, wow, somebody did really good with this. And we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but I think it really just goes to show that the game is really healthy across the board. Obviously, 2 30-plus player events happened this weekend, and you know, they had reasonable caps to them, so I think there's a lot of room for more upward mobility moving forward. So that's my lukewarm take to go with my hot drink. So,
do you mind if I add just a little bit to Matt's cold take?
Yeah.
So coming back to the game, I heard a lot of people saying in podcasts and all the shows and stuff like, oh, you can play anything and win, which I think when a lot of time when people say it, they don't say enough in it. And I think you got to give a lot of credit to, there's a lot of just really interesting primaries in Shatterpoint that if you really devote the energy into and to like unlock the right things to go with them and the right situations to play them, shout out to like, say, the Ahsoka list that Philip Scarata has kind of pioneered with Mando. I think there is a lot of credit there. I don't want to go so far as to say like everything is truly playable on the same level, but I think there's a lot of things that people overlook, and I'm glad that Matt kind of hit on that. And like, there's some like really cool shit in Shatterpoint if you want to dig into it, and that's fun.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, with your comment about Phil and Ahsoka, there was a really good interview on Zion's Finest where he like breaks down his run at Lone Star Open and really gives you kind of his analysis of the character, which I think was really neat, because it's definitely a less known character. So it was neat to hear somebody who's having a lot of success, like their deeper dive into it, gave me a new appreciation. So
fantastic episode. God, I loved listening. I didn't realize how much it was about the replenishes. And so when I tried the list, I was trying to play it for that. And I definitely saw what he was going for. And
Yeah.
fantastic episode. Also, shout out to Hello There's recap of Amon and Jesse's games, which Zion's Finest episode was so fucking good. And I would have been like, this is one of the best episodes I've ever listened to for Shatterpoint. But fucking the Hilaire there episode is insane too. Like, what a week for Shatterpoint episodes.
A lot of good events right now to get good recaps.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a busy con season. You got LSO last week, SLO, and Gen Con this week. Nova's in 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. Like, is there anything else coming up? I think that's it, isn't it?
I think there's a When's the Canadian GT?
There's a GT in Seattle in like 2 weeks.
Oh,
We've got a GT in Florida in about a month in Orlando at the Crucible.
All the GTs. All right. Phil,
That time of year.
what is your hot take and your cold drink? I need to get this locked down because I keep I keep switching your name between the two. I don't know why. Like,
Well, especially now that we're referencing the other Phil, who's actually out winning events, it's going to get really confusing for our listener. But
This is Accuser. This is Lord Accuser. You know, Accuser with 2 names. You know, whatever. But it's Accuser.
I'll take that.
Accuser with 2 names.
Rebellious Accuser.
No, but I think that, like, Omnus kind of touched on where my hot take was going. I do think any primary in the game, you can win with it. This game rewards reps more than anything. I don't think there's a character that's, like, dead on arrival that you can't pick up and run with if you put the time into it. I mean, Ahsoka's a big example. I know that there are players out there that make Grand Inquisitor work really well for them. You're rewarded for your time and your commitment, and committing to the bit isn't necessarily a bad thing. As for my cold drink, I'm actually also drinking Sam Adams tonight. I've got the same pack, and I've got a Port Rocker right now.
I didn't like the Port Rocker. Mm-mm.
It's perfectly fine.
I normally like Port Rocker. That's one of my go-to Sams.
It was the first one I grabbed. I'm saving the cherry wheat ones for later.
No, I'm thinking of the Rambler. I don't like the Rambler. That's the one I didn't like. The lemon one. I did not like the lemon one.
No, that's the Port Rocker.
Okay, yeah, no, I hate that one. It's absolutely disgusting.
I'm drinking that one. I'm gonna get out of the way before cherry wheat. I mean, it's perfectly fine.
No, it's
no
gross.
complaints.
No, it's
the best.
No. I am enacting. I'm enacting dictatorship here, and it's gross. Like,
Listeners, you've gotten to the beer review section of the podcast, and apparently Port Trucker, not great.
The lemon's too strong. The lemon is way too strong.
But
like,
that's just like your opinion, man.
So you're saying that the lemon beer is light side?
Yeah, it's gross. Like, stay away. Come to the.
Didn't have my usual dark beer in the Sam Adams pool pack. It's not that time of year.
Go to the cherry wheat. The cherry wheat is the cherry wheat is a fantastic beer. If you want like a cheap Sam Adams, like, get cherry wheat. That thing is delicious.
Fine, I will finish this. It's my last one, and then I'll go to the cherry wheat in my fridge. We've got an hour.
We do. All right. So Matt, I want you to take us away with this Gen Con LSO stat review, and you have the show now.
Yeah, so we don't want to go as deep kind of as we did last week, but wanted to hit on, first off, obviously both events happened this weekend. We had Gen Con came in at 33 players, Salt Lake Open at 31. Winning Salt Lake Open was Kenny from Zion's Finest. Talk about separateness there. He came in with, he brought Grievous, Dooku, and a Kanan Leia list, which I am loving. So let me throw these up so we can kind of quick take a look at them. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because obviously everyone can go here to Longshanks and look. But what I thought was neat with Kenny's list, so because I have this extra stuff, we can look at what he played. He was a pretty fair mix. He had 3 games with the Kanan Leia and 2 games with the Grievous Dooku. So I think that was neat. We saw as Dizzard pointed out very, very clearly that Thrawn and Leia were new. So a little less data overall for them. One of the things I thought that was really neat about this event in general was they didn't do a top cut. They just did 5 rounds, which is one of the options in the grand tournament packet. So I would have been curious to see how people would have paired a little bit more into top cuts, but this was the overall. I don't want to. We'll get a little bit more into the meta with a different sheet, but this is just kind of the breakdown for Salt Lake Open. Kind of the people who were a little more unique. It seemed like we had 2 Leias that went 4-1 or better. I thought that was neat with Leia being new.
Thrawn.
Yeah, and we had a Thrawn, yep, and like Thrawn was played, and here's one of my takes, well, one of my things in general, and we'll look at it when we look at the other event as well, is that Thrawn didn't have as much of that dedicated pairing, and this was my biggest takeaway from looking at both of these events. But looking at this is like Thrawn had some mix in, right? He was played with Vader and Gideon, which I thought was really neat. We talk a lot about how most people do 2 lists and just switch back and forth. So I thought that was cool that Thrawn was very interchangeable. And we see that again in our other event. Let's switch over to
While you're pulling
So
that,
while you're switching to Sarah Cruel, Utah pocket meta ? All metas are pocket metas.
Also, real quick to add on, and also relevant to Sarah Cruel, because I talked to Sarah Cruel a lot about Thrawn. We whisper sweet nothings.
Shout out to Sarah Cruel, by the way. Just a really cool person to have in the Discord and just very interactive and very fun. So big shout out to them.
Absolutely. But Sarah Cruel and I talk like at like 3:00 in the morning. We'll be messaging each other about Thrawn. And last night we were talking about at Thrawn o'clock. We were talking about how we think that Thrawn might be one of the first primaries that feels good and is probably designed around being an actual anchor. And this kind of goes to Matt's point here. And that is like Thrawn is just good. Like he gives you mobility. He gives you all these things. And then the direction of the list is 100% dictated by what his pairing is. Like if you want to go aggression, you're taking Iden or Vader. You want to go control, you're taking Moff. You want to go which way you're talking about. That is dictated by his pair, and I think that is very much like it feels like it's part of his design is to like maybe he is just designed to be an anchor list, and that's what we're kind of finding. And Sarah Cruel kind of pointed that out to me last night as we were talking. I just want to give him a shout out to that.
I think it's really fitting though for the character. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we see that again here. So then looking at Gen Con, Duncan Godliness won, went 5-0 in the Swiss, and then went through the top 8. But we see what Duncan did, and he has Thrawn again in here with 2 different pairings. He started with Thrawn, Grand Inquisitor in game 1, and then clearly was playing Vader 2 and Iden as kind of his other list, but then was able to switch back into a Vader 2 Iden or a Vader 2 Thrawn option when he saw a Kanan Mando. So again, we see Thrawn being able to swap in with other primaries, which I think is really neat. And then getting into like the top 8, we saw, he just ran Vader 2 the whole time, but we still saw the Thrawn Vader 2 pairing and the Iden. So clearly showing that Thrawn has a little more depth and being played a little bit more here against the Revenge list, it looks like. The time we saw it with Vader 2. So I thought it was interesting. And you talk about anchor list so looking at all of the events that we've had recently, this is at least the first one I can think of that went like 4-1 or near the top cut. Will Maurer, I apologize to pronounce that wrong, played a clearly Hunter anchor. He played Hunter every round and just swapped something in. So I thought that was really neat. And mostly was playing Hunter Mace, but went 4-1, won his first round in the top cut, but played Hunter anchor. So I thought that was really neat to see a pure anchor list clearly doing well.
Before we move on from Godliness too much, speaking of podcasts, I think it was a Space Slugs episode where he dug into why he plays Grand Inquisitor. Also a really good podcast that I recommend for people. Thought he was super insightful in that.
Yeah, it was his Grand Inquisitor Luke episode from a while back. Yeah.
Oldie but goodie.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, any thoughts on these, and then I do want to look at the overall meta as a whole.
What were the struggle packs for the 2 winning lists? We didn't say that part.
That's a great question. I believe because we didn't get SPT data for everything. So Duncan was playing shift and priorities with his all.
Duncan.
And I believe
Struggle.
I believe Kenny was on Never Tell Me the Odds, if I remember correctly, because I thought, Never Tell Me the Odds. I remember thinking that the Separatist on Never Tell Me the Odds was an interesting choice. Because I've not had a
Second
chance
best,
to
go
play
Kenny.
that much. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to play Separatist on Never Tell Me the Odds, and it would seem like it's good, but people who have tried it a lot have told me they have not been having success. So I have not had, I'm just more kind of curious about it. So
I have a quick question. Amon was playing Never Tell Me as well, right?
yes.
Okay, so
He
what
was
we're
Never Tell Me the
seeing
Odds.
is if you want to win your GT, don't play Sabotage. That's what we're seeing.
Wait, I'm pretty sure Amon played shifting priorities. You're talking about Amon's
LSO.
LSO list?
Yeah.
I think he played shifting priorities.
Regardless, it wasn't Sabotage. Like that's
Yeah,
the
definitely
moral of the
wasn't
story is
That-
you want to win a GT, you don't play Sabotage. That's what you do.
I'll quick look because I still have that event bookmarked, but I was pretty confident he played Never Tell Me the Odds because that's why he swapped Commandos in. Let's look. I'm gonna look here. Oh, I forgot I'm only sharing that tab. Oh no, he did play shifting. He went back to shifting again. You're right. You're right.
I have been worshiping that as my god, as like my God's Bible to
Mando.
to Shatterpoint, because that like just happened right after I came back. I still have that like browser open on my work computer.
Any other thoughts on this before I want to look then at a little bit of the kind of combined data for the meta as a whole, as we would call it, for the
Yeah.
weekend?
I'll go first here. I want to point out that I was almost proven right from a couple weeks ago that Thrawn almost took an event within the first day of him being released. So suck it, Matt. Accuser, do you have any hot takes you want to talk about this event?
I think just even in this high overview, I think that it's showing that anchor lists are possible. We touched on being a prime candidate for a true anchor pairing. He can play with anyone really well and feeds off of that pairing and enhances what the other primary's bringing. But I think that we're also seeing that with Hunter, right? You can place fairly well at a GT playing Hunter every game and then swapping around primaries. I love that I'm seeing Mace Windu as this pairing of choice. That's cool. But yeah, I mean, I think that where we were talking a couple weeks ago with anchors being a possibility, I think we're getting closer to that. And Hunter and Thrawn, I think, are the first two where you can really do it successfully.
Omnus?
I think my most interesting takeaway from looking at the data, and I've looked at it a bit like over the course of the weekend, just kind of trying to stay up on it just because it's been really interesting, is that even though if you just kind of like, if you're kind of a casual player approaching this or semi-competitive, you might look at this stuff and have a quick glance and go, hey, this is a lot of the same stuff, but you're seeing a lot of different mixtures of the same stuff. Like there's no everyone playing the same four primaries. You're seeing who's running which supports and secondaries changed up. And so I just think it's really interesting that you kind of have to practice against mixtures of everything. And I think that's a really good thing about the state of the game. And so I'm finding that interesting. Like there's no, like, obviously there's the Iden box, right? Like the Iden box generally is the Iden box, but in most other cases you're seeing like a variety of things ran. And that's just interesting and, exciting to like plan against.
Absolutely. I have one more
Yeah.
thing I wanted to point out. You closed it out already.
I can go
And
back.
that was going to be the sheer amount of Maul compared to LSO to these two events. Because it was crazy because Maul was, 4 times at LSO? And he's at least double at one of these events. I don't remember if it's both of them, but I know one of them, like, he was at like 12 or something.
He was brought up a lot at both for sure. Well, so that gets into the next thing I want to look at is the meta of both. So here comes our quiz time.
Oh no!
So between both events combined,
God, I did
we're gonna
bad
do a
at
little
this last
guess.
time.
Yeah. So between both events combined, so we had 64 players. So that means Each player brought 4 primaries. So we're going to start with Omnus. What do you think was the most brought, not played, most brought primary and least brought primary between both events combined?
I hate that you're gonna make me say the least because saying it out loud is gonna be painful. Let's see. Most brought, I'm gonna go with Mando. I don't like, my gut says that it's not gonna be at the top. And as much as it hurts my soul, I'm gonna put Asajj at the bottom just because this is what other people are playing, not me.
Okay. Let's go, Accuser. What do you got?
I think the most played was probably Moff Gideon, if it's consistent with like what we've seen out of LSO in the North American League from last time. I'm gonna go with least being Chirpa.
Okay.
Chirpa's a
And
good one.
Diz, we're coming
I
around to
forgot
you.
about
All
that
right.
stupid Ewok.
I think most played will be Kanan. Least played will be a tie with Chirpa. And God, I forgot what the other one is, but it's something else. It's a tie.
Way
I'm
to
making pick
hedge.
for least. Yeah, no. So then we're sticking you with Chirpa. So you guys were correct on the least play. 2 of you were correct on least played. Chirpa was the least played on the weekend. Most played
Poor guy.
were most brought were Hunter and Maul.
Wow.
At 20 each.
Okay.
I was gonna say Hunter. Oh,
Oh, and Chirpa,
But
sorry,
you
we
did
cut
it.
off the bottom. Chirpa's literally there at the bottom. We're
didn't.
gonna the screen cuts him off for good reason.
Oh, fair. Hunter Maul.
So
No,
yeah,
Hunter
I
Maul.
wish I'd
That's
at least said
crazy.
Padme. Can't believe I shit on Asajj.
Yeah,
yeah,
Saj got brought
that was gonna be
a
wrong.
lot. One thing I thought was really neat was, and we talked about, and as Sarah Cole pointed out, like kind of like the meta, right? The biggest meta shift that I saw between the two is the prevalence of Vaders. Gen Con was clearly favoring Vader 2, with 9 people bringing it versus Vader 1 being 3, and Salt Lake Open was the opposite. 9 people brought Vader 1 and 4 brought Vader 2. So a very dramatic difference. So if we look at what was brought by event, and here's another way we're going to look at kind of like the difference in the meta. Hunter, Maul, for Salt Lake Open, Hunter, Maul, Kanan, Obi, and Vader 1 were all the most brought things that 9 of 30 or 31 people brought them. So very different top. I mean, we saw a lot of these same models in the top like 10 for Lone Star, but this was very unique, and for other events as well. And then looking here, if we look at the top brought things for Gen Con, Hunter, Maul, Mando, all at 11. So top Gen Con stats were most brought were no Empire. I thought that was really interesting.
I wonder
I'm
if people
surprised, for
thought
sure.
that because of Empire doing so well at LSO, that they thought a lot of people were going to be gearing for it. Maybe?
So that was my thought. But if you look at, so here's what's interesting at Salt Lake. If we look at actual played, most played was Kanan. Like 26 times Kanan appeared on the table. I thought that was really interesting. How often Kanan was brought. And Kanan had, minus the Princess Leia that went 100% win percentage at Salt Lake, Kanan was tied for had the 3rd highest win percentage at Salt Lake Open. So we look at win percentage at Salt Lake Open. Princess Leia won all 4 of her games. Dooku had a really good showing, 67%, and was played 15 times. And then, Mando, Kanan, Vader 2 were all up there above 60%.
Man, I think Princess Leia is going to be in conversation for one of the best primaries.
She's really good.
Nope.
I think she's waiting a little bit for the perfect releases where like her squad becomes perfect, but I think she's an insane primary that at some point there's just going to be this perfect thing for her to run. Yeah, she's going to be a force to be reckoned with for a long time.
She feels a lot like a Talzin to me, where there are a lot of lists where you can run like Talzin's core box with another thing, or you can
Yeah.
just slot Talzin into a list and not needing to bring the Night Sister synergy and still does well. Like you can just take Leia and put her in with, I mean, we saw that with Kenny, right? Kenny went Leia, Kanan, and it was all Spectres and then the Rebel Commandos, but it was clearly more of a Spectre list. He didn't bring Luke or Han Chewie, so
I mean,
it's interesting.
I played into someone playing
Okay.
Leia Kanan this last week, and that list, as the kids say, slaps. It it definitely caught me off
Leia's got
guard.
Riz.
Leia, I don't know what that one means, but we'll go with it. Oh,
You're not
man.
ready to goat it?
Okay, we can stop now.
I'm not going to explain it to him. So move on.
But I think the Kanan Leia list is something that's like to be mindful of, and I do want to say between LSO and these two things was a wonderful episode by Hello There, saying if you're going into a lot of Empire, Mando Mall is going to be good for your list. Words that like I think the touting of Mando Mall, just being in general in a lot of places over the last week might have influenced a lot of this. And because
Well-
LSO, we saw only 4 malls, and Mando was up there, but nobody was playing mall. And I also just like to look at this because it just makes me feel good about myself because I called it over a year ago that mall will be ever present.
Mall might just be the best, but I just want to specify, like, I think if we're trying to communicate what Hello There was saying, Mando Mall is a counter to the Imperial counters.
Yeah.
Like, if someone wants to run Super Revenge into Empire, it can get fucked by Mando Mall. Not that Mando Mall specifically in itself is going to not get wrecked by Iden. You know, so just like a little clarification there.
No, that's fair. I did say I messed my words up. That's what I was going for, but then I'm like, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, I
I'm
think.
here for you, Grand Admiral.
Thank you. Your words escape me all of a sudden. All right, move
God is.
So
GA
then
is.
looking, so like comparing, so again, looking at, so Salt Lake's win percentage, right? We see Leia, Dooku, Mando, Vader 2 is like the top 4, and then Kanan, top 5. Those are all people above 60% win percentage. If we look then at Gen Con, we see a much more Empire-driven story because of the people above 60%. It's Vader 1, Vader from the bottom up, Vader 1, Vader 2, Hondo, Iden, Gideon, Thrawn. So at Gen Con, 5 of the 6 things that did 60% or better win percentage were Empire. I would like to point out Hondo wasn't brought at all at Salt Lake Open. So
Ooh.
that was interesting.
Salt Lake can be wrong.
So
But no, it's cool to see Hondo top 5 at least one of the events. That's interesting.
I want to jump back to Sarah Cool's comment about Utah pocket meta, because a lot of you, Salt Lake Open was Utah. It was mostly Utah represented, and when you listen to Zion's Finest and a lot of their discussions are very separatist tuned. I do think that they have focused in on separatists a lot as far as like perfecting the separatists. Like Kenny, let alone like kind of proves it. He's really good with Dooku. And he sings his high praises a lot. If you want to get good with separatists, talk to Kenny. That's my best advice. But I don't think Hondo plays into separatists. And if you're trying to prepare for what expecting your local meta is, I don't see Hondo making sense in a separatist heavy meta, especially when you have like one of your better players of the meta who's really good at separatists. Like that's not going to win you that game.
That makes sense. And then kind of summing up, so I don't know if there's any other thoughts on the Gen Con stuff specifically or comparing. I think that kind of shows a little bit of the difference in the meta. And then overall, so if we look at win percentage across the weekend, granted, not played a lot, comparatively, Leia went 4-0. Hondo only played 13 times, it was 64%, but then it's, Vader 2, Dooku, Gideon. With a lot of games played and all above 60% win percentage on the weekend. And then poor Chirpa down here at the bottom. Sure.
Poor Chipper. Somebody tried.
Chirp.
Like A for effort.
Yeah.
That's absolute A for effort. The chirp is cool, but like you've got to run full Ewoks. I don't see a world where you run like Princess Leia chirp at least yet.
I think what surprised me a little bit more is how things are floating down. Like some big name people kind of already losing steam. You know, we talk a lot about Han when he came out, about how cool he was. And a lot of people were really trying to run with Han, and he's, 33% win percentage on the weekend. Lumi always gets high praises and didn't really have a great showing on the weekend at 40% win percentage, near the bottom of the list. So I just thought those were a little more interesting as the higher played numbers at the bottom. We talk about the difference in the Vaders. Vader 1 and Vader 2 were brought a similar amount, but Vader 1 was 48%, Vader 2 was at 62%. So I thought that was interesting. Just comparing those two. Maul with the perfect 50% on the weekend.
Can always rely on Maul. He's always there for you. No, it's very, very, very interesting to look at this stuff, and thank you for putting these spreadsheets together because I'm bad at Excel.
Yeah, this was interesting trying to combine the two because we had talked about trying to do more of a breakdown of like what pairings did really well. But we're trying to combine two events worth of data. It was a little challenging.
That's fair.
So yeah, I think these were some interesting results, kind of our evolving meta. We see a little less Empire overall for amount brought, which I thought was neat. So I think that's healthy for the game. I think it's not as surprising, honestly. We talk about Empire being the big scary, but I think people are finding ways to play around the Empire meta. So
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to pose one question because we did it with Lone Star Open, and that's going to be after reviewing all this data and looking at it. What biggest takeaway for trying to read the meta? Omnus.
I mean, I would say the first thing is you've got to be prepared for a lot of different things. My gut instinct right now is if you are not going to play Empire, is that you want in your premiere, you want a good option to play Revenge and you want a good option to play Displacement.
Yeah. Accuser?
I think it shows the meta is constantly evolving. While we're talking about the Empire now and the Empire is still dominant, like a single release wave can change that. And with the pace of releases that are coming for the next couple months, I think that it's going to be really hard. Like all of these conversations are going to end being like specific moment in time and not reflective of the game permanently. It's Empire is scary now, but as people learn to play around it and new releases add to the toolkit to beat it and play around it, um, it's just a really healthy game right now where anything has the potential to play well. And I mean, Diz, you weren't wrong. I remember listening to that episode a year ago. Maul's still great, and he's held up.
Matt.
I think I agree with a lot of what Omnus said, as we kind of thought that was going to be the case going into this. Yeah, I think you have to be prepared for Empire. You can't just overlook it. I like the idea of bringing more of an all-comers list of some kind. And look, an all-comers list can be an Empire list. It's just designed to do one thing and can take on basically anybody.
It's called Thrawn.
But you need to, yeah, right. I mean, yeah. And then you just need to have an answer, right? You need to have an answer for Empire. You need to have that list that is just your fallback list of my opponent could do a lot of stuff here. This is my comfort zone. This is where I'm falling back to. And then your other list in my mind should be what fills in the weakness of your comfort list. Which makes your turn 0 really impactful and kind of interesting. You kind of get to play a little bit of a mind game there, but that's my biggest takeaway and kind of my thought going into Nova and how I'm planning for it. So
Same. I think this comes back to what Omnus said early on in the episode, and that is just play games against everything because you don't know what's going to take gold. Because last week, LSO, Separatists not present, like not really there. This week, Salt Lake City, Dooku taking the gold. Like you have Hunter everywhere. You have Princess Leia everywhere. You've got Talzin. You've got pretty much everything but Chirpa. That's probably the safe bet to not play into. But like the moral of the story though, right, is just get games, and I think it's more of if you can understand your list more than your opponent does, I think that gives you the edge. More than being able to be prepared for one specific thing is being practiced and being ready with your list.
Also, don't have short-term memory. I think maybe it's easier for me because I haven't been playing for 6 months, but I come back and I feel like everybody's really down on like the best things from the first 6 months. And I think there's a little bit of like people have short-term memory of like they're focused on the new stuff that's really heavily being tested and explored. But that doesn't mean that like Dooku and Maul and stuff haven't, like those models have not gotten worse.
Nothing
They are
changed.
still really good, right? Like
there was
they're
no
still
errata.
amazing.
Like there was
You
no
know,
no
and
nerf.
so
Nothing.
yeah, so just still keep in mind that like those things that were great, like we don't actually have like I don't actually think there's been pure power creep, right? There's still a lot of things that were released in the first few months that are insanely good. And so like I said, just keep those things in mind. They may not be on the top of all the podcasters' minds and on the top of all the discussions, but there's a lot of great things that have been released the entire length of this game. So try to keep an open mind to all of it.
All right. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to, I guess, the overarching topic, and I guess this also relates back to a lot of the discussion we've had about this meta relevancy, and that's gonna be proactive versus reactive. We're gonna define some of these terms and discuss what this looks like when you're looking at it in your list, from primary to support, all the way down A to Z. So we're gonna go ahead and start off with a quick definition of what we mean by proactive and reactive. And Omnus had sent me something earlier that really kind of like it makes sense. It's super simple and it's way better than I said it, because if I said it, it'd be here for 10 minutes.
You're a little wordy, Diz. We
I
love
am.
you, though.
Now I'm trying to find it.
You sentence real good.
I don't. Uh, there it is. Proactive versus reactive. Proactive being that aggro and displacement. You are actively going and you are the one moving stuff. You are the one that is being aggressive. Key examples of this being Vader, Maul, Iden. These types of lists like this that are very proactive versus reactive. You got Revenge, and Omnus had said relocation. And relocation being teams that move multiple models during each activation, a lot of ability to get characters back on points when shoved off. AKA, we got Thrawn in here, we got Django, we got
No, Django would be a bad example.
That's
Django
fair.
doesn't move models back onto points. That would be like Separatists, Obi-Wan, or like Obi-Wan 1, the stuff that's like what I was thinking about for that was all the things where you're like, oh, if you're playing against displacement and you're just shoving like one person off a turn, there are lists that can just like move a bunch of shit back onto points. If they're not wounded, that just get things back on a point. So that's, I think, the most under talked about list archetype.
Yeah.
And that I think is a very reactive play style.
That's fair. We also have Godliness Duncan in the chat saying Iden isn't aggressive at all, and I don't know what you're smoking, good friend, but I'll trust your words because you proved it. Iden's, you heard it here first. Godliness, quote unquote, Iden isn't aggressive. ... at all. I kind of want to explore that thought actually now. All of a sudden, it's a little squirrel brain right now. But like, how would you guys all say that Iden is aggressive, or would you say she's not aggressive? Let's talk Iden specifically, not the Iden box. Matt.
She obviously I think can do both because she's got a ton of movement, right? She's got that Kalani range of movement out of the gate for getting all the scouts going, which I think is huge. And especially on like shifting and Never Tell Me the Odds, she can just disperse really quick. But she has the ability to kill if she needs to. This is one of those areas where like I'm gonna yield to Duncan, who is, the highest ranked Iden player on Longshanks and has played a crap ton more than me. But I don't inherently, I think of Iden as like, yeah, okay, you have Hask and you're gonna do a bunch of damage, you're gonna kill a bunch of stuff, like with Hask and ISF. But I absolutely see the manipulation and movement aspect that she has, very Separatist-esque. So I see it. It's not my first thought, but
I think that's a fair point, and I think you're onto what he's getting at here. And I'm just too smooth brained when I play Iden that I see pew pew, and that's what I want to do with her because like you see pew pew, and she's got a card side that says full auto and burst fire. So you're like, okay, she's got a machine gun. Let's go mow some people down. But I think it's actually a very valid point. I think because she has so much mobility because she has the tactic ability that lets a lot of stuff dashes happen. She has a dash for her force. She's got reposition on her tree. Then, of course, she also has her move action to top it all off. So there's a lot of mobility happening and going on that really can make it to where she's not really aggressive in the sense of she doesn't have to be aggressive, and maybe the straightforward approach isn't the correct approach. And I agree with you. I'm just gonna default to Duncan here, and like with the way I said it, I guess kind of comes off as sarcastic, but I do actually mean like I'm gonna default to Duncan here and trust what he is saying by Iden isn't aggressive. Omnus, thoughts?
So I think here is where it comes into the definition of aggressive. And even when we were having the discussion earlier, Diz, there's a reason why aggro, aggressive, like they mean different things to different people. And like what I really want to say is murder.
Yeah.
Like however you want to get to that. And I can understand why someone is like, depending on how you see an aggressive play style in your mind, depending on what game you came from and whatnot, can mean a lot of different things. Fundamentally, what I mean is I do believe that Iden is a proactive versus reactive play style. Like, sure, you need someone to step onto a point, but everything needs that. And like, if you're saying that something needs to come onto the midline and control a point for you want to activate that character, then everything would be reactive. But what I think is fundamentally super murder characters like Iden and Vader 1, like Vader 1 maybe is a little easier for people to see as aggressive in the sense that Vader 1 also wants to get to the midline, that wants to push into the table more, whereas Iden is certainly happy to sit back, which is its own kind of aggression in the sense that aggression, again, probably just not the right word. It's about wanting to, like, oh, as soon as you put something on, I want to start killing stuff and gaining momentum and putting pressure on you that way. And maybe we just need a better word for it in in Shatterpoint. And murder is a little aggressive and maybe not the word that we want to use, but because aggression builds and like all these things have been used by other games so much that maybe we need our own thing.
But it's also like you and I and like Sam in the early days of Shatterpoint, we tried approaching this topic so many different times, and it was like, how do we define archetypes in this game? And it was very much like you kind of can't because of the fact that so many pieces do so many different things at once. Like Iden can be very absolutely like murder. She can also be absolutely mobility. She can also be absolutely control because of how many conditions that her and the ISF can put out. Like between her, Hask, and the ISF, you have so many conditions out there. Like this one box is doing so many different aspects to the game that it's hard to put archetypes on stuff. But I think when we were talking about progressive versus reactive, I think that was like a good middle ground because you can define proactive as I want to be doing stuff to progress my game state based off of what I want to do. And reactive being I want to progress my game state in reaction to what you're doing and then counteracting what you're doing. And so like you're leading the game, but I'm counterbalancing it and then getting an edge on top of it. Like I would argue that Thrawn is more of a reactive player because yes, he has a whole lot of mobility that could be seen as proactive, but you're using that mobility a lot of times in a reactionary sense to undo what your opponent's doing. Okay, I go with Thrawn. I'm gonna move my piece here. Okay, cool. My opponent moved here. Okay, cool. Now I'm gonna use a battle tactic.
You're talking about Thrawn while we're trying to talk about Iden. Let's finish the Iden discussion. We could have a whole Thrawn episode for you, buddy.
Okay.
But just to like touch on Godliness's comment, she does murder. Yes, she also zips across the world. I don't think we're saying that she can't zip across the world. And don't whether the aggressive part of it doesn't matter. It's that I think we all agree that she's probably proactive and that like she wants to go forward, do her thing, and then that also makes it so you move other characters. Like I still don't see her as reactive. Maybe that's something that Accuser will disagree with, but I doubt it. Maybe he surprises me now.
Accuser, what are your thoughts?
No, I think she's 100% an active play piece, but I would agree with Duncan, A, because he's got the expertise, and B, I mean, I think most of her kill power is enabled by her box. I don't think you don't bring her to kill things. She can, but I think you're using her combat trees to reward and get mobility. I think that ultimately she's kind of like Hera with a bigger gun. She can influence the board and move herself, move her team, and play proactively. But I think it's very selectively applying pressure versus straight murder.
Yeah, I agree with all that.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you immediately.
You can. It's more
Yeah, I
fun
think
that
Give
it
way.
us
just,
the time.
aggression is too vague of a thing.
Yeah.
Is really what that comes down to.
Outside of Vader 1, aggression's really nebulous in Shatterpoint. I don't think there's a clear like aggression. Like, yeah, you can kill things, but if you're not killing in furthering the objective state, what was the point? So I think Vader 1's like the true kill piece, and everything else it's in service of things on your tree, your mobility, your displacement. And I think that's where it kind of differs from other games where you look at dice results in favor of pure damage, where this is like turning on a different toolkit. You're getting results to shove, you're getting results to reposition, you're enabling what the model's trying to do through combat, not just the damage.
I think one of the things that's going to come down to a lot is trying to put things into two bubbles is going to be tough. If you think about most of the like psychological identity things, right, where it's like people, they talk about personality types, like it's like red, green, blue, right? There's always three options, and then there's the Venn diagram of where things merge. So that could make it a little bit harder to kind of to put stuff in in one box or the other.
I stand by.
And
If you
this
look at
game's a
this,
Venn
like, 4
diagram that's almost a
grids,
circle.
right? Like there is proactive on the top, reactive on the bottom. And I still fundamentally think that there's the stuff that's like kind of heavily focusing on wounding to get an advantage, and displacement are kind of in the most proactive. And then you
Mhm.
look at on the bottom, there's 2 quadrants, and then it's the stuff that's all about like reactively moving a lot of characters. You think like DTE's abilities, right? Like DTE's kind of activations, that kind of stuff. And then like the revenge kind of stuff where you're getting your advantage by going, you want to wound, and if you do that, I now get a bunch of advantages. Or you don't wound, which is also an advantage for me if you don't get to do your favorite thing, which have to be a little bit more responsive.
No, I think it's another good way of looking at it. It's like basically who does stuff more on their turn versus can impact the board more outside of their turn.
Yeah.
Is another big
And
way
there's
of
going to be
looking at it.
hybrids, right? Like
Yeah.
you're most of the time a list isn't going to be just one of these things. It's good. And if you find a list that's actually like kind of good at all of them, then you stumbled onto the fucking gold. Like, every single character's Maul. Great.
Well, I guess that goes in the question, right? Is like how much is too much of one way or the other, and is that more based on your playstyle personally, or is that based on the meta, or how do you determine what you want to put into what slot for your list building? Like, let's go to Matt. Like, you're preparing for Nova, and you're trying to think about this. Are you taking a proactive approach, or are you taking a reactive approach, or are you mixing the two across the whole entire field?
With the way we talked about kind of Omnus's last definition, I think I'm overall looking to be a little bit more reactive across the board because I'm looking at more, into an Empire list. I'm trying to figure out where my head is in terms of a revenge type list. And then as my other list, I thought at one point about going Empire and just basically having the reactive list and the proactive list, right? Empire, my goal is like I'm just going to overwhelm you and hope that I'm going to outplay you on things. And then when I see other aggressive lists, I turn into my reactive list. But then you have the option of like a Maul Mando type thing where it's basically Maul Mando and a revenge list are both reactive lists across the board. Granted, the Maul Mando piece has more proactive things. Like they're going to make more aggressive plays, but I still consider it more of a control type list than a pure aggression type list.
Okay. Accuser, if you were to go to an event coming up when you're looking at this, where does your mind go?
Reactive. And this is something I've kind of learned about myself the past couple months as I've gotten more back into Shatterpoint. revenge triggers are kind of the mechanic that have started like really speaking to me in my play style and being able to react to the board state, particularly into Empire. But I mean, most everything's trying to do damage and wound, and I'm really liking like Kanan. I'm liking full specters. I haven't put Charming Leia on the table yet, but like that's a model that I'm dying to play because I think that being able to influence the board on your activation or outside of it is what I'm really starting to value.
Absolutely. Omnus.
Well, so for the most part, I feel like I've always been a very reactive player. From back in the day in War Machine, like I preached reactive strategies in a game that was primarily proactive across the board. And then in MCP, again, probably still a very proactive player for the most part. And I think that carries over. And I do think that like displacement, even though I think a lot of people would think of it in the same vein as they think of like control from Magic, but I do think that displacement is as aggressive as a murder play style is, where you're like, I'm immediately, as soon as you put something on a point, I want to move you off, take the point, and do that every single activation. It is still very aggressive in Shatterpoint. And I've noticed that I don't lean like fully into that. And there was a really good discussion in our Discord that I kind of was like, because it was a thought process of mine and I liked where it was going. I was kind of like, how well can you build something that's actively kind of trying to do all of these things? And so I'm definitely in a spot where I lean reactive, but I'm definitely looking for a level of versatility where like I'm kind of like, how much can I push into a lot of these categories? I actually don't care that much about killing. Like if that one's my distant third, that's fine, or distant fourth. But I'm definitely in a camp of like, how can I push all of these to like 60, 65, 70%? Like, can I do that? And I think that's an interesting headspace to go into. And I don't know if you can, but it'd be cool if you can.
So I like thinking about that, and isn't that kind of the essence of an anchor list? Is you're kind of like, I want this one primary that does this one thing, and I'm bringing all these other primaries and these other squads to bring something that I don't normally get instead of doubling down. Like I'm gonna try and limit myself here, like Thrawn. I think that he very much is like a good anchor because he does this one thing really good. He does a lot of like mobility out of any one activation. And when you pair that with, let's say, Vader or an Iden, then you become very like mobile, even more mobile and more kill. If you pair it with Moff, you become more control. You pair it with Maul, you become displacement. You pair it with Mando, you become more tanky. You pair it with Kanan, now you got like revenge triggers. You pair it with like any, like the list goes on to where you have this one. I'd argue that Thrawn is very reactive because he wants to use his mobility in response to what your opponent's doing, especially with how you build the list.
I agree with that.
And then the pairings that you go with it is you go ahead and just use like a proactive approach with a lot of the other lists, and now you have proactive reactive, or you can go reactive, and be able to push this envelope to where, and like this, like this, to circle back, I think it's very much like an anchor really kind of defines that purpose, doesn't it? Of trying to find the perfect hybrid of mixing these two.
I don't know how much it exists in a single anchor list. Like, obviously, I think if you're going to build an anchor list, right, it's going to probably speak to whatever you prefer playing the most. Um, I think to truly like hit this in the whole capacity, it would have to be a premier list, right? Like, how well can you actually do all of these things,
Yeah.
or at least in your two list combination, like you kind of need all six characters or units to kind of balance each other out in this whole picture if you're trying to balance all this stuff. But if we kind of come back to the main point, I think most people are probably going to lean on one thing super heavy because it's going to be their preferred thing.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. It's like if I'm going to an event and I want my best chances to win, I'm going to go with what I'm comfortable with. If I've played 100 games of Maul and X and I get dropped into somebody and they're playing Empire and I'm just like, man, I don't know if anything really goes, I'm just going to hope my repetitions with this list carry me through this game. And that's a fine strategy. And like I honestly, that's why I'm so like I love Maul so much, right? Because isn't Maul? I would argue Maul is a proactive and a reactive character. We said that he's a very much a hybrid character, and I also think Mando is very much the same because he wants to do stuff really good during his turn. He reacts to you doing stuff to him. Maul was always that reactive because he could just go take a point. Like he could just go do something and undo what your opponent did. That's where my proactive reactive on Maul comes from. Is he could just undo.
I don't agree that Maul is reactive.
But
I
he-
think
he
by
undoes
our
stuff.
definition, but he doesn't. He's not moving people back onto
Okay, fair,
points,
fine.
and he's also he's not. He has a revenge trigger,
It doesn't
but it's
exist.
like small. But he's good damage output, and he's great displacement. And I would say he fundamentally is defines like an amazing proactive character.
Okay, so how would you define Mando? Would Mando you say is the reactive version of Maul?
He's right in the middle because
Okay.
Mando has some like really cool reactive stuff, right? With like his revenge trigger, which is like not as good as Kanan's, right? But it's like kind of generic. But then he's got good displacement too. Like he's kind of like just right in that middle ground that gives you a decent balance. But he's like he doesn't have a lot of ability to move other characters back onto points during his activation, and then at the same time also doesn't do like great damage. So he's just kind of this perfect, like in our diagram he'd be kind of on this side, like kind of halfway in between, like, oh, I've got good displacement and I've got good like some good revenge options, which is why I think a lot of people like him, because he's versatile.
You got Sarah Cruel in the chat. Kanan greater than Mando, greater than Maul. When in regards to this conversation, I kind of don't disagree with that because, like I said, Kanan can move people. Kanan can move himself. Kanan can react.
Yeah, again.
Like so, is Kanan the perfect hybrid of all of these elements?
I think that is probably the case. Like as long as you're running him with some Spectre stuff and
Yeah.
you build around that, like you're right. He's not bad damage output. He's great revenge option. He's got fucking force push and good pushes on his tree, right? And he's got the ability to move other characters. Like he is truly a hybrid of all of these things and probably an above average across the board.
Okay, I want Matt. Can you look up Kanan's overall win percentage in launchings right now? I'm curious now.
Overall, yeah.
Because I'm really curious. Accuser, do you have any thoughts? Well, Matt's looking that up.
As the
I mean,
Kanan
as far
expert,
as far as Kanan goes, I think as long as you've built specters into your list, and I don't think there's a reason you should ever have fewer than like 4 when you're running Kanan. Yeah, I mean, there's not much he can't do. He holds his own on his own turn and does so much out of activation. It's fantastic. But I think he's in contention probably as a really surprisingly fast character too, considering he can dash himself twice on his tactic. It's there's not much he can't do. He's perfect.
Matt,
I mean, Kanan
perfect
is
might be
on,
a slight stretch. Accuser just sneaks that shit in like.
on Longshanks. He is the. I
Listen,
mean, granted. Go ahead.
Listen, Kanan's gonna be my Maul as far as like Dizzard
Oh,
goes, right?
we
Like
know.
we're gonna lean on something here, but
For sure. I
no,
get it.
Kanan has limitations. A lot of it's in list building. He can
Stop
squish
pretending like
for
you believe
sure.
that.
Which part?
all of it.
That you think he has limitations.
Yeah.
He does. You have to play him with Spectre. He's not like
Yeah.
we talked about charming Leia at the head of the episode, right? You can slaughter over basically anything as long as you've got rebels or spies. She's gonna be fine. Where Kanan, he needs Spectres for most of his revenge trigger to do work, and most of his mobility is built around Spectres too. Kanan's very much a team player. He's not. You can't just throw him in anywhere and expect results.
I mean, Kanan, third highest win percentage
That's
of people with, obviously
you
outside
can.
of Leia. Yeah. I mean, it's a real thing. He also plays well with a couple different builds, so I think that also is going to help him out there with his versatility.
I think as time goes on, assuming that we don't immediately get a bunch more Spectre characters, I think there is also the option. I know Accuser said 4, and I know he's he fucking loves Rebels. He loves Kanan. He wants to lean into this.
Someone's got to
And
do
I-
it.
Right. But I think there is also room where we may see some lists in the future that are Kanan and then both secondaries that doesn't necessarily like lean into the Spectre quite as much. I think there is still room for like Kanan is still good without getting the Spectre murder, like the Spectre revenge trigger, like all the time.
Sure.
Like he's still just good. And I think there's going to be some room to explore him without like really forcing the Spectre thing completely. I think you want at least 3 out of 6, but I do think that there's going to be room for that, not just the 4+.
Yeah. Okay, so
And for what it's worth, I think there's.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, for what it's worth, I think there's unexplored territory here. I mean, yeah, like right now we lean pure Spectre with Kanan, or at least, a high percentage of Spectre, but like he's got the Scoundrel tag, and I think as Scoundrel gets fleshed out in that era, maybe with the Bounty Hunter box, we start to get some other like interesting possible
Nodding.
tag synergies for Kanan to explore. He's got some interesting future proofing.
Give me Shadow Collective, please. Like,
Oh man,
I don't hate
Collective
it.
future is gonna be sweet too. Yeah, Kanan's just a good character, and I think obviously people, when stuff first comes out, I think people naturally lean into like how hard can I push this specific synergy. But I think there's not a new thing for Omnus to say, but I think hybrid builds are still going to be a very valid choice. And I think Kanan, as much as he loves leaning into that Spectre tag, I think there's going to be some hybrid options for him too.
So you're saying if you're building a list, you're trying to make your premiere as balanced between proactive and reactive as possible.
I guess I'm saying that.
I mean, I think it's fair. Like, I think it's very much like that's where I'm at. I'm very much. I don't want to be a fully proactive list. I don't think there's any stock in being like I'm just gonna go and try and overpower my opponent every single game with just sheer like I was almost at aggression, but like just sheer I guess overpowering and overwhelm my opponent with like being proactive 100% of the time. I think if you didn't have any kind of reactive, whether it be as simple as DTE, being able to just suspend a force and move back onto a point, that's a great reactionary skill. And having that is amazing. But it's like if you're just 100% proactive, you're waiting on like you're at the will of your opponent to just like give it to you, and my opponent versus reactionary gives you agency. So I 100% agree. My long-winded way of saying I agree.
So in response to Sarah Cruel, who is just saying, all I'm saying is his revenge trigger is better than Mando's without the attack. Jump more often than not is better than a reposition unless you need distance due to the verticality. I think it's really difficult to kind of compare the two, just because Kanan's is response to like rebels or specters, and Mando's is against everything. So while I agree that fundamentally you probably have more powerful impact from individual Kanans, you can't discount Mando's. It's just like you always get it. And the replenishes cannot be ignored. Like the fact that he can heal 2 off himself when he's already durable. I don't think we want to like weigh them too much against each other, because it's just cool that there's like, how can I work in the question should more be like, how can I work in some revenge to punish those super murdery lists or whatever we want to call it, and get a good amount of that to flesh them out, as opposed to just kind of trying to say that one is better than the other.
All right.
You don't even need to compare them one against the other. You could run both of them.
People do that, I hear. It's good.
Matt, do you still have that top list of primaries pulled up?
Yeah, I can switch back to it.
Okay. What I wanted to hit on real quick before we finish this up is
Are you talking about for the overall or for the events this
overall.
weekend? This one? Okay.
Yep. Okay, so I wanted to look through this real quick, ignoring Princess Leia because there's not enough games to really be quantifiable data. When we look at the top 4, we got Iden, Moff, Kanan, and Hunter as the top 4 primaries of all Longshanks reported games. So when we're looking at proactive versus reactive, what do you guys see in these top 4 as like standing out? Let's go with Omnus.
Oh, just a second. I'm trying to expand the thing and see how big I can make it.
That's fair.
It's a little
I can
difficult to
buy.
read. So let's see. So we got perfect.
Zoom
God
in.
bless you, Matt. Okay, so we've got Aiden at the top, who I would define as proactive.
Mhm.
And then you got Princess Leia charming to the last, which I would describe as very reactive. And so that already is trying to say that like these are both really good examples of great versions of either side. Moff Gideon, I think, is a little harder to place what he is. Like he's got a very proactive like identity that's like, hey, I'm counting double or I'm breaking ties and I'm giving additional dice to like helping people take objectives. So he's probably proactive. And then you've got Kanan, who's very, I would say, leans reactive, but kind of does a lot of all of it. So to me, this like I look at the top 4 and go, this is or I guess actually Leia and Aiden are tied. Is that
Well,
what
so
that?
no, it's because Leia doesn't have enough data. That's why she has the
Oh, she
star
doesn't
there.
have enough data.
Yeah. So I'd kind of throw her
Hunter-
out for this conversation.
I don't want to throw her out. I think that number is probably going to rise. And then we look at the rest. Again, we got a good mix. I think Count Dooku at my gut says reactive, Vader 2 proactive, Mandalorian a good balance, Vader 1 proactive, Mother Talzin reactive. I mean, like if you just go down a list of like great proactive and reactive characters, like this is the list.
Yep.
In a lot of ways. So
I
none of that surprises me.
my biggest takeaway from looking at this list, and I'm curious if your guys' thoughts on this. What I see here is what I'm building my list around. I have Iden, I have Moff, I have Kanan, I have Hunter, I have Dooku, I have Vader, I have Mando. A lot of these are like my first primary in a pairing when I look at this, and none of them are like, I guess I'll take Iden as the pair here. I guess I'll take Moff as the pair here. I guess I'll take Kanan as the pair here. They're all very much, this is what my list is designed around, is what this character is doing. And I think that these are like the characters that are setting the stage. And like you said, they kind of, like, Kanan's probably the one that's like a little off because he does different things. But like most of these, I would consider proactive characters. And maybe that is something to consider in your list building is these are the top primaries, and there's probably a reason for it.
See, one of the interesting things I see here is more that pairing, and I want to kind of talk about that pairing mentality you looked at, because obviously a lot of these Empire characters can like most of Aiden's games are probably with Gideon or Vader too, right? Whereas
That's
Kanan,
yeah,
like the only person in this top 8 Kanan might get paired with is Mandalorian.
Yep.
In my mind, Hunter probably doesn't get paired with any
Anything?
of these people.
Yeah.
So like,
you could pair Hunter and like Jedi Hunter.
Hunter Vader 1 I've definitely seen and like seen do well. So yeah, I mean it's not the go-to opinion in my mind, but like or go-to place I'm going. Dooku can get paired with kind of anything. That's just one of the strengths of Dooku. Mando can kind of get paired with anything. Talzin, I think, is in a similar boat. So I think that's the one more telling thing is like some of these characters really feed off each other, and other ones are having high win percentage and are clearly getting just mixed in with a bunch of stuff.
Keezer?
I mean, I'm looking at this. I'm seeing active and reactive, and in a couple cases, even ones that like, Mando blending styles depending on what you need him to do. For me, it shows that, this game's still pretty wide open, and you can start with one of these guys and you can tailor it to your style, right? I think Shatterpoint list building is really adaptive to what you can make work for you. I don't think even picking like Hunter pigeonholes you into doing one thing. So much of it's driven by your pairing. You can make any of these characters work in what you need them to do. I think I've seen Hunter Mando before, and I don't hate that. That's a good marriage of styles too. Um,
All the
I
bad
I
batch
just
are
think that there's a
scoundrels for the most part.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, play with Wrecker and make Mando have like protection. Like, okay,
Seems good.
don't don't hate it. Yeah, why not? Um, yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of really good options here, and once you get past some of the lore hangups I know I had early on in the game, I have no problem running Hunter with Mando. That sounds like a great time. Why not see what happens?
Yeah. Okay. So let's go into wrapping up this discussion, closing thoughts overall on what we have talked about. I guess I'll start. And for me, I think overall in this discussion, the biggest takeaway is you really have such a hard time putting these types of terms in play in this game because one, everything is subjective, and I can see a character a certain way versus Omnus seeing a character a certain way, and that's probably the hardest thing with defining certain terminology in this game. I also think that, especially off of that last little list here, it's really just play what you want to play. It always comes back to that, right? Play what you're comfortable with, play what you want to play, and then build your list around that. And I think that's what we see there in that like top 8 list is people are playing what they want to play, and they get good with it. I think Kenny is a great example of that. He loves Dooku, and he got really good with Dooku, and then he takes down Salt Lake City with it. So, Matt, what are your closing thoughts?
Um, I think I agree. It's gonna be tough to label everything. I think the best spot is to have some kind of a balance between what you're bringing. I think running ultra reactive, like both your primaries being very reactive, means you're playing it in a very niche spot. I think both your primaries being very proactive means you're playing it more in a niche spot. I think overall, my mindset is you want that kind of blend, and it gets interesting when you talk about it in a premier list format. Then and like you said, like anchors really change the way you think about it a lot. So I do think it takes a little bit more fleshing out and a lot more, as you said, like everyone's opinion's a little different, so it'd be harder to kind of really define. But um, I think find a nice blend is always the best approach.
Okay. Accuser.
Play what you want because I think all of it's workable, right? Pick a thing, get the reps with it, learn where it fits and what fits your play style, and build for that, and you'll have success in the game. I mean, if that's a pretty wide list, that top 10 that Matt just showed. Like, there's something for everyone there. Republic, droid, scoundrels, whatever the tag synergy might be, it's all viable and workable. So if you dedicate the time into that and hone your play style and hone the characters that fit what works for you, great. You can be successful at this.
Omnus.
So the way that I would wrap this is if you're the listener, you're kind of going, okay, well, you guys just talked for a while. Like, what is my takeaway as the listener? And I would be like, one, if you're listening to this and you're going like, oh, I generally play like diceless displacement and murder, maybe just try a list that's aiming for the reactive stuff or vice versa, just so you can kind of see what it's like from the other side of the coin, see if you're either missing something, or if you're like always playing reactive stuff, maybe just because your favorite characters happen to be reactive, then and you're like kind of like, oh man, I'm always struggling against this, and maybe like see what it is like from that perspective, so you can kind of say like, oh, these are the things that kind of like fuck up your game plan, like, okay, and so that can like naturally shift you from that, like, oh, I'm just building naturally for synergies, and you can kind of see like, oh, if I sacrifice this synergy for this inclusion, that messes with your game plan. All right, cool. Let's go further with that. Or maybe it's just like helps you with a little self-examination where you recognize that you're that kind of player. And maybe you're listening to this and you're like, oh man, I do really prefer reactive stuff. Like, I want to like see what you're doing and countering it. I'm used to playing control in Magic, and you notice that you're playing characters that are very proactive based on this discussion, then maybe you go like, do you have a favorite character that happens to be something that we've mentioned as reactive, or vice versa? And maybe you might find that you end up enjoying the game more if you're or maybe you go, okay, well, I'm playing Hunter, who's a very aggressive, very proactive character. I guess he's kind of a mix, so it might be a bad example because he's also like got that reactive move. But maybe let's just say Aiden's your favorite character, or Vader 1's your favorite character, and you're kind of going like, I love playing these, but I also feel like I'm missing something. Can that other character in your list kind of balance things out and give you the play style that maybe naturally speaks to you a little bit more, and maybe that'll just make you enjoy the game, and just like you're getting more out of your day-to-day experience. That would be what I think is the takeaway for the listener. And also, I agree with everything that Matt said because he's just like my clone from another state.
Fair enough. All right. Bald meta. Anyways, we're gonna give a quick big shout out
Meta OP.
to our patrons. We have the people who have been with us for a while, and then we have new patrons with Ketchup Man and Withy joining the Scoundrels. Thank you guys for supporting the show and being wonderful people.
I promise my spiciest takes are gonna be for the patron chat. You guys are gonna get the heat.
Yeah, come hang out in the Palace Rotunda, or the Rancor Pit, whichever one you want. All right, so we're gonna move real quick and do a quick Challenge the Odds review. I'm going to start this off with saying we're gonna change the format of Challenge the Odds a little bit. This is gonna turn into like more of a monthly thing, to where we're gonna have a focus of the month, and however many games we play of it and record will be however many we get. Will be at least one. And it just kind of gives more freedom to be creative with this, instead of being like, oh god, we need to time crunch this and just throw a list together, and then we're locked to one game with this list, where we had Sarah Cruel handing out and be like, well, I wonder what this looks like in the Empire. Well, this gives us the opportunity to test that idea into more different things and be wider with it, and also just having a fun episode where we review Challenge the Odds and the ideas present, and be more of a freeform episode once a month where we review this type of stuff. That being said, Matt and Accuser, would you guys like to take away Challenge the Odds and review the Ewoks from this last week?
Yeah, Accuser, you were the one playing the Ewok, which is the challenge. Do you want to give a quick kind of overview of what happened?
I mean, so we're gonna air quote Ewoks. Technically, they were all Ewoks because I brought Leia. So I had Leia Freedom Fighter, and I ran her with new Luke and with the Rebel Commandos as a 7-point package, and then I ran Logray, Chewie, and Zebarelios as my other Ewoks. It was something I'd been dying to try for a while. Dizzard and I were bouncing that around a couple months ago, and I know
You couldn't even
Magic
get in
Nick
two
and
Ewoks.
yeah.
Two?
No, you don't need them. You don't need them. You just need Logray.
They're all Ewoks.
So in all seriousness, like they're all Ewoks technically.
I get
but
that.
The really cool thing. But here's the cool thing, right? With Zeb being a warrior tag, which he's the only Rebel warrior tag that's not Freedom Fighter Leia. You get some really cool interactions with Logray with Zeb. I like him in Ewoks even more than I like him in Spectres. He did so much more work in that game. And Chewie as a scout and the Rebel Commandos as a scout, they all got a lot of really cool benefit from Logray. So yeah, that was the list. And then Matt, why don't you run through what you played, and then we can talk through kind of how the game went overall.
Yeah, I played a pretty generic Republic. Listen to it. It was Hunter, Lumi. So Lumi had Crosshair and Arfs, and then Hunter was Eka, or was Wrecker, and then the 212, because I kind of want to try that one out because I know people have been doing it. I think overall it was really interesting. I know from like being the side not playing Ewoks, I was really impressed with how well, especially a few like Zeb seemed to really punch pretty hard in this one. I thought he paid off really well. So overall, Ewoks wound up winning in 3 struggles. I think it was pretty balanced across the board overall. I think we had a few weird dice rolls, but nothing that was like in any way egregious to either side. I thought it was a really good game. Ewoks impressed me. They had a lot of killing power. They were able to put out some wounds when they had to, although your Logray ability never really helped you because it was always like get the dash, and you're like, well, I'm on the point I want to be on. Okay, I'll shimmy
Extra
an
movement's
inch.
never bad.
Yeah,
Sure.
Leia's exposure was huge, which we kind of knew.
Yeah. The Leia Expose was huge. I loved the Luke Commando package because that meant the Commandos were able to pay a force, dash into a hunker and a focus. And I mean, that's a Commando rolling 8 dice with 2 dice rerolls. They were punching up. Most of the list was punching up. I was actually very shocked by it. But then Logray having his ability to give an Ewok warrior a dash and 5 dice attacks. I mean, I think Zeb. I mean, he maybe activated once or twice in that game. I forget how many times we went to the deck, but I mean, he attacked a lot more than that. He basically soloed that one side of the board, and then Chewie was stupid mobile. Like, I mean, he got from one side of the board to the other, no problem, and then soloed the other side of the board. Like, I don't know. I didn't expect a lot of Chewie or Zeb, and I think they were both like
Chewie
arguably
soloed that
MVPs.
side of the board. I like that. I don't know if anyone
The
else caught
pun
that, but
intended or
I
otherwise.
appreciated it.
Intended or otherwise, he did some work.
Yeah, I will say I was very surprised with, I know people have been down a little bit on Chewie overall, and me included. I think he just seemed like he was going to be really cool and just hasn't quite held up. But no, he did a lot. And I will get that game posted. I have it. I forgot to post it earlier this week. It'll get posted after this episode. So go check it out. Watch it. Let us know. Give us any more feedback. So, yeah, it was a good one, though. It was a good challenge. I appreciate I liked it.
I
It gave me
learned
a
a
better
ton.
respect. Yeah.
I mean, I learned a ton. I didn't I knew Ewoks were like it was possible, right? But like Logray really shocked me. I think I shatter pointed him. He activated 4 times that game at least, and every activation was meaningful. I mean, half the board moves. You're getting your Zeb to attack. He's not a slouch attacking either. Logray was way cooler than I thought he'd be. And Leia, she was mostly exposed, but she did some cool stuff too. But I think Logray was very surprising for me.
All right.
Yeah. Look good.
I was move on, but if you wanted something to.
Yep. No, you're good.
All right. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic to Omnus here, and what he's going to do is he's going to give out our unlearn what you have learned, and he hasn't been a part of this yet, but basically challenging the audience to do something over the next week that isn't typical.
Let's see. Unlearn what you have learned. I don't know if this fits the bill or not, but I would say as much as people are focused on playing the new stuff, I think you should pick at least a one squad that's from the earlier releases that you haven't played in a while and like work it into what you've been playing, especially if it's something that you haven't heard talked about as much. Maybe if this is more relearning, but I would say just like go back. I feel like people are just discounting the old stuff. And so I don't know. Does this fit the unlearn what you have learned? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that would be my pick. Is just like I feel like people are discounting the old stuff. So just like go back, grab a squad of the old stuff, like something that like you just think works with this like new primary that you want to try, and like play them together. And I think you'll be surprised at how well the old stuff works.
All right, and
Eric Rule, you can play it with Vader 1.
Yeah.
That's old enough.
Alrighty. On this, then go ahead and close this out for the episode.
All right. Well, the most OP thing, or the most Star Wars thing that you can do is you can get dragged to another dimension by Purgles for 6 months, and then Night Sister witches lead a whole crusade to bring you back, and that's how Omnus returns to Shatterpoint. And it's a Thrawn reference. I love all of you nerds. Later.
Told him to go Gandalf, but that was great.
All right, that's an episode.
Oh, that was great.
Oh, all right.
Wow, what an ending.
I told you I knew instantly what I was gonna do. I just finished watching
was-
Rebels and then watched Ahsoka.
That was perfect.
And we're talking about my
Perfect.
return. A Thrawn reference plus currently what I'm
You
watching
hit
in Star
everything.
Wars. Yeah.
Magical.
With creepy pipe organ music and a cargo hold full of, I assume, zombies.
True.
Gold face stormtrooper, fucking everything.
All right.
That dude's cool as shit.
I like the actor too, even though we haven't seen his face in the show. I like the actor who plays him.
That's fair. Box win. I don't know because we got Thrawn already. Like, man. Well, with that being said, thank you for hanging
there's
out.
not 3 versions of Leia.
Fair. You're
Be
not
a second
wrong.
Thrawn.
You're not
Whatever.
wrong. You're not wrong about Thrawn. Haha.
What
No one
about
would
him as an
complain.
Imperial primary? Like not as a secondary. I know we haven't seen him do that much, but that could be cool.
Yeah, like just a bunch of zombies. Like,
Would they be the first things
Or-
with Stormtrooper and Dathomirian as tags?
Or it could be another Night Sister. It could be the Great Mother from the Ahsoka show. Then bring him in as the secondary, and then Night Troopers as the
Morgan
support.
Elsbeth could work.
you're not wrong.
Then release it alongside, hear me out, Blin Skull primary, Shin Hati secondary, Marok Inquisitorial Mandate support. Done.
No, give me Balin, man. Like, what about Balin? Like,
That's what I said.
I-
Make him the primary.
Yeah.
Accuser, you said that out loud, and you just imagine that I look like what Bill Murray did after Slimer hit him. Like,
all right. Thank you for hanging out on Twitch and the conversations that had. You guys have been wonderful. Have a good night.